And all of a sudden, when I saw them coming down the street, I, of course, thought they were coming for me. And I was kind of looking around, you know, and I was wondering if I was standing on the grass or if I was doing anything that would provoke 500 policemen. Well, thank God, they walked right past me, like I wasn't even at the abortuary. And I asked one of the last policemen when he passed, I said, "Where are you all going?" And he said, "Oh," like I hadn't, you know, been on this planet for a while. He said, "Well, we're going down to protect the people at the reflecting pool. Pope John Paul is coming to town." And I said, "Oh, how marvelous." Well, I'd been at the clinic, the abortuary. I don't like to call it a clinic because that implies care. I had been at the arboretum about 2 hours, and the girl had not shown up. So I got in my car, I drove down to the reflecting pool, and we saw the helicopter come from National Airport. And I remember the Pope got down, and a beautiful breeze, you know, carried his cape a little bit in the air. And I was so close to him, I was 20 feet away. And I just had tears in my eyes. Now, this was many years ago, of course, before I joined the Catholic Church. And then that Sunday, when it was very rainy, there was a huge crowd, and Nellie Gray from the March for Life was given an honor that she well deserves. My husband and I were just sitting at the TV in rapt attention, and when he said those words that you just mentioned, that life is sacred and we will stand up.
Yeah.
That impressed me, and I have never heard those words from even any minister in any other denomination. And I was very pleased. Our sermon this morning was about the Pope standing up in Sicily speaking against the mafia. And Monsignor Gatto very courageously said what bravery and guts it takes to stand up against the forces of evil, even though you may be the only one, and even though I believe if the assassination attempt you know, against the Pope had been successful, he wouldn't even be here.
Yeah.
And if I can remember correctly, that was involved somewhat in the mafia, and yet he was courageous enough to say those words.
You know, I was in Rome at the time he was shot, and I just mentioned it because the spot where I shook hands with him and said a few words, it was in that exact spot where he was shot, and I was very much surprised when the sisters, when I went to Lourdes, they tried to tell me what happened, but not knowing French, someone finally interpreted, and I was quite surprised at what had happened.
Of course.
And just having seen him, it was very impressive.
I know it was. Mike, the other thing is only the Catholic Church has been on the battlefield, in the trenches, on the pro-life movement against, obviously, abortion, the gateway of which, of course, I now realize, as Dr. Marks has pointed out for 20 years, is artificial contraception.
Yeah.
That's the gateway to abortion. They've been in the trenches against artificial contraception, abortion, infanticide, and euthanasia for many, many years. And there is not a church on this earth that has been fighting as they have.
So these are some of the reasons then that you were impressed on the positions that the Catholic Church takes. And of course, I've sensed that the Catholic hierarchy is kind of stepping back, hoping that other denominations would come into the forefront to be part of this pro-life movement. So in addition to the pro-life, what other aspects of the church impressed you most to make you want to join it?
I like, frankly, a church being open every day. I always said that I always wanted to start my day in church, and now I have no excuse not to. So I take it at 8:30, you know, Mass, and I like about a 10-minute sermon in the morning, and just to center my thoughts on the Lord and let Him direct my life, you know.
They do have daily masses, and of course over the weekend it is impressive to see all these different masses. But you mentioned earlier, and I found this to be very true in my travels throughout the world, that when I go to a Catholic church, it's just like being at home.
Exactly.
You know, it's the same the world over.
Universal church.
Yeah, I understand it, and so I find that very satisfying to know that I can go anywhere.
That's right.
And
my husband's conversion was interesting. Also, he felt led 3 years ago, when our church almost folded after the pastor died, to return to his small Episcopal church where his family had worshiped for many years and he had as a boy. But he found that the interim woman pastor was very liberal. In fact, I invited her to my home, just frankly to check her out. And I found within minutes that she was accepting of lesbianism, homosexuality, artificial contraception, certainly abortion. And they had a survey of the congregation, and this is a very tiny congregation, about 120. Most of them are about age 65 or older, very traditional. And they asked that a permanent pastor after the interim would be hopefully a man, a married man, a father with traditional values. And within the vestry meeting, when the surveys were returned, and overwhelmingly this is what the congregation wanted, the interim pastor said that if they were not accepting of a homosexual or a lesbian, that they were politically incorrect, insensitive, and not 1992. So my husband came home visibly upset. It was 10 o'clock at night, and he asked me in almost a plaintive tone of voice, he said, "Do you think I can join the Catholic Church?" Well, Mike, I was on the telephone within a minute, maybe a half a minute, calling the priest, asking if Carl could join, and then, of course, he got into the RCIA program.
When did all this take place?
Well, for my conversion, it was 3 years ago, and my husband's last Easter, so it's just in about a year for him. And I frankly don't think that anyone should join any organization, a club, a sorority, a fraternity, a group of people that they will invest their time, energy, interest, and money into that they don't agree with. I mean, I don't want to even join get a savings account in a bank or something, or any organization, or a women's club, or flower or garden club, or whatever. I do not want to invest myself and my energy and money, certainly not my tithes and offerings, in any organization that I feel is anti-life, anti-family, anti-God, even anti-country. And I'm finding, and it's no surprise, Mike, that the 4 mainline denominations have lost millions of members. The Methodist Church almost every year loses about 85,000. And it's not just from death. It's an attrition from people who are tired of their money going to unscriptural causes. And we're down to a low in the Methodist Church, I think, of about 8.9 million from a high of almost 14 million, and many of the other denominations also. In fact, I thought this was rather charming. This whole parish down in Texas, you may have read this, the Episcopal parish in Texas becomes Catholic. That the entire congregation of 126 people, there was one abstention, I believe, voted to become Catholics. They gave up their Episcopal connection and joined the Catholic Church.
That's extraordinary to hear something like that.
Well, as a church historian, I have never heard it. In 2,000 years of church history, I've never heard of an entire church voting to leave one denomination and join another. Also, one bishop up in New Jersey said that he felt that St. Paul was a homosexual. And I feel that that does, of course, a great disservice to the reputation of St. Paul. And on what he bases this, I do not know. But we know that at least 2 bishops in the Episcopal Church have ordained lesbians or homosexuals, which is, of course, totally anti-Bible.
Well, Olga, if you don't mind, I think we'll take a short break to hear a word from our Holy Father, Pope John Paul.